just to add another means of authentication. In addition to Google, which we already did, Google practically does itself. I suggested GitHub as the next because everyone has a GitHub account, so let's look at that really quickly. In Firebase, if you go to the authentication section, into sign up method, where you enabled Google, let's enable GitHub. Enable. Looks like we need a client ID and a client secret, and it says you need to add this authorization callback to your GitHub app configuration. Learn more. So if you click Learn More, it opens up the Firebase docs for authentication, and you can look under Web, GitHub on the side to learn more about GitHub specifically. It says you need to register your app as a developer application on GitHub and get your app's auth 2.0 client ID and client secret. Register your app. Oh, it takes you right to that page. Wouldn't you know it? So to get here, if you didn't do that, up where your avatar is, go to Settings, scroll down to Developer Settings and OAuth Applications, and register a new application. Same thing, but there was a link right to it from the Firebase documentation. So note herder S3 afternoon, something users will recognize and trust, because they will see this when they're asked, do you trust this application to have information about your GitHub credentials? Homepage URL, you have to put something here. Your GitHub pages URL is fine. Description's optional. Authorization callback URL. That's the thing you need to copy out of Firebase. And please note, you need to use the little copy to clipboard button here. If you try to do it by hand with your cursor, you will probably accidentally highlight something that's hidden. I've seen it happen over and over. So use the little button they give you. Hit register application. And wouldn't you know it, it gives us a client ID and a client secret that we need to paste back into Firebase. Save. All right, let's go back to the documentation. Okay, once we've done that, we need a GitHub provider object. No big surprise. GitHub auth provider instead of a Google auth provider. So let's add that to our base.js. There's our Google provider. We'll say export const GitHub provider equals new firebase.auth.GitHub auth provider. Don't forget to update your example with the same thing. So now that that's exported, on the sign-in page, we need to pass the appropriate provider to sign in with pop-up. And right now, authenticate always passes in Google provider. So we should change authenticate to take the specific provider as an argument. Change our Google button so that it's on click event. Make it call a little arrow function that calls authenticate and passes in a Google provider. Then we need to import GitHub provider in addition to auth and Google provider. Let's add another button. Give it a class of GitHub. It's like we gave the other one a class of Google. There's already a rule in our style sheet for that. On click, we will call again an arrow function that calls authenticate, passing in the GitHub provider instead of the Google provider. We'll say sign in with GitHub. If you look at static note herder, we just used font awesome to get a GitHub icon in there, or GitHub logo. So I, class of FA for font awesome. FA GitHub is the particular icon we're looking for. Let's log out. Make sure we didn't break Google sign in. Still works. This is using the mornings base.js. Let me copy the afternoon version back. Using the wrong Firebase. There you go. Sign out. Try signing in with GitHub. You need to give it permission to access your dstruce account or whatever your account is. Notice it says Note Herder S3 afternoon up here, whatever you put in your settings on GitHub. And it does tell you where it's redirecting to, which is a Firebase URL. That's the thing that you copied and pasted. Authorize, and I'm still here. So I got an error message. An account already exists with the same email address but different sign-in credentials. Anybody else get this? So no one did the homework, in other words, if no one else got this. Or you had different emails. Anyway, if you go to the sign-in method page on Firebase, scroll down far enough, you see one account per email address. You can change this so you can allow the creation of multiple accounts with the same email address. Try it again. There we go. And of course, this user will be a totally separate user from the other version with a new UID and everything. If you wanted to allow users to sign in using multiple accounts that share an email address, and you wanted them to receive the same notes regardless of whether they logged in with Google or GitHub or whatever, you could just, in your schema, instead of using UID here, you could use email address or something as the key. Change that in app.js in sync state. Just change the endpoint from notes/UID to notes/email address or something like that, so that each version of that person would get the same notes. That's all there is to adding GitHub authentication. If you wanted to add anonymous authentication or something, or any of these others, just follow the instructions because the documentation is really good. Want to do anonymous? Click enable. Read through here about anonymous authentication. You don't need a provider for anonymous authentication. You just need to call sign in anonymously instead of calling sign in with pop-up. So not too hard to add more means of authentication.